everybody. Thanks for joining us for a Rebelle U about keeping your vehicle alive, not just for the Rebelle Rally, but kind of in general. Some tips and tricks on how to prep your vehicle, how to identify problems, and some key things to look out for. Maybe some good tips and tricks along the way. We're going to answer a lot of questions about that people have brought in about like tools to bring along, spare parts to bring along, fluids to use. And that kind of brings us into a good point to talk about. This is brought to you today by Pennzoil. They are sponsoring the Rebelle U here for the mechanical end, and they're going to be sponsoring a whole bunch of the mechanical portion of the Rebelle Rally this year. So let's get into it. Come on over here. All right, so we've got a couple of cars here today that need to be prepped. My truck over here has seen some pretty heavy use this winter. We've had lots of rain, lots of snow, and it's been getting abused. And Carey here, Carey Lando's how many time Rebelle?
Twice.
Twice Rebelle. And where'd you place last year?
Third.
Yeah.
Third last year.
And she's out pretty frequently with her car, so we should be able to find some good issues to identify on her car. And Carey also has a pretty good understanding of what to bring with her and what to look out for when her car starts making noises and how to go through that process and figure things out. You'll have to forgive me a little bit. This is my first time doing this, and not having an audience in front of me or not having somebody to talk back and forth with might be kind of difficult. So I do have notes. Yeah, where should we start?
I think the first thing that was really helpful for me was becoming familiar with my car, and just the general parts of how it works. You know, what parts work, how they work together, what sounds are normal for when you're off road versus on the road, and what things feel normal.
Yeah, okay. So that brings some good points to the surface. I like to pre-trip my car as if I'm going out and buying a car. So that's when we're the most critical about a car, right? Like your buddy calls you up and they're like, hey, I've got this sweet ride. You might be interested in it. It's like, okay, let's go find all the problems with it, right? So I like to go just kind of front to back on the car, and we can do that today. And we're just going to kind of generalize what we're looking for. So let's go over to the truck. So obviously we're going to start with the basics. We're going to check out lights and wiper blades and all the easy stuff that everybody should already know how to do. And then we're going to pop the hood, and we're going to start top to bottom in here. We're going to check all the fluids. So oil, power steering fluid, brake fluid, coolant level, all those things. And there's a lot of questions about service intervals on that and what I should use, what shouldn't I use? Is there anything better? Obviously, we like our Pennzoil products. And they make more than just oil. They make all sorts of vehicle fluids that kind of cover front to back on your vehicle. So obviously we like to go that way. But service intervals, your manual, especially off-road, Rebelle Rally, those things, your manual is going to offer you a severe cycle interval on that. So whatever the severe time frame is on that. So when we do oil changes under normal driving conditions, we might say, hey, 7,000 or 10,000 miles is appropriate. But under severe driving conditions, we're probably looking at more like 5,000 miles. Transmission has those severe cycles and stuff like that. So paying attention to that is important, and it can make our vehicle last a lot longer. Obviously, before the rally, we want to make sure everything's tip top going in. So it may be beneficial to go get that stuff serviced ahead of time. Yeah, so looking at the motor, once we've checked the fluids, the basics, checking the dipstick and all that, checking the fluid levels, looking at the bottles, we can start looking at the overall motor. And instead of zooming in real tight and looking at something specific, I like to spend a few minutes just kind of like taking it all in. So I look at it and I just kind of, maybe I start left to right or top to bottom and I start looking at things. Do I see anything that is obviously out of place? Do I see oil? Do I see wet spots? Do I see rust, which could indicate metal on metal? And wearing metal that's turning into rust? Do I see shiny spots that maybe shouldn't be shiny that indicate things rubbing together? I can look at my belt. Does it look frayed or cracked? And a good rule of thumb for rubber parts, are they braided? Are they cracked or are they broken? So all these hoses, the rubber hoses, rubber belt, all that stuff, I'm looking for abrasions or cracking really. So I'm too short to see in here, but you can all see. Now I'm going to come back. I'm going to look at the front of the car. My truck's kind of cool because the grill lifts out of the way. I can see the radiator and everything, making sure there's not any obstructions. I don't have 10 years of bugs packed up in my radiator, or a whole bunch of mud from a previous four-wheeling trip stacked in my radiator that's going to cause cooling issues for me. Because, as we start out up north in the rally, generally the temperatures are cooler, but as we get down south by Glamis and stuff, that impacted radiator is really going to start causing issues for us. So if that's packed up, we can start flushing it out with a hose, anything like that now, because we don't have that excess water on the rally, right? So we can flush all that out. We don't want to use like a pressure washer against the fins because we can bend them over and cause more of a cooling issue than we already have. Moving down, I'm just gonna come back by you guys here and I'm gonna look under the front of the car. Can you grab me that flashlight over there? So looking under the front of the car, I'm doing the same thing. I'm kind of wide angle view. Do I see anything that's obviously out of place? Get a little more light in here. So it's dirty, right? That can mask some things. So generally I like to get a little cleaner. Then I'm going to start coming in a little bit closer. And then I'm going to have a friend go and grab the steering wheel for me and just rock it back and forth a couple of inches either direction. What that allows me to do is check out my steering system. And I hear a click. Do you hear a click? I hear a click. So I'm going to start feeling around. I'm going to put my hand on things. Keep going, Carey. I'm going to put my hand on things. I'm going to look at these things. Do I see any play in anything? And I'm looking. I got a track bar back in here. Oh, I feel a click in the track bar, but that joint doesn't look like it's moving a whole lot. A little bit. We can follow that up to the other side. And if you see right here, that is a worn out track bar bushing. So real easy indication that, oh, I got a problem. That's a pretty audible click too. Click, pop, click, pop. All right, Carey. So I'm going to check out all the joints while my friend's turning the steering wheel. That click, pop brings up a good point. Our cars have a love language, right? So sometimes love language is fighting words, and the car's going squeak, 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 squeak. We got to listen to that. We got to identify that. It's okay if we don't know what it is, but we can sit in our driver's seat and say, hey, it sounds like it's coming from the front driver corner, or maybe it's coming from the passenger corner. Roll up the windows, roll them down, see if it changes, see if you can dial in the area. Then maybe it's have somebody shake the car while you have your head down there, narrow it down a little bit piece by piece until you find the spot and you find the noise. And even if you don't know what that part is, now you've got your hands on it. You say, hey, the noise is coming from this part. You can find that knowledgeable friend or your trusted mechanic, whoever it is. You can go to them and say, hey, I know this noise is coming from this part. What's going on with it? Oh, it's got excess play. I need a new track bar bushing. And now you got that knowledge in your bank. Hey, the track bar bushing makes that noise. I can start at that spot the next time I hear a noise and either rule it out or say, hey, maybe I got a bigger problem playing into excessive wear on this particular part because it keeps wearing out. Right?
Right.
Right. All right.
Sharing knowledge is great.
So I'm a huge proponent of just kind of getting under your vehicle and taking it all in. Properly chalked, properly braked, right? You know, not dangerous situations. If we're jacking it up, we're putting it on jack stands, but being familiar with underneath your car. So you just kind of get familiar with what's out of place when something happens. When you do that, you'll be able to crawl under a car before a wheeling trip and be like, hey, that wasn't like that last time. I wonder what's up. That could save you a lot of headache down the road. My philosophy is fix it here in the shop where I've got lift and tools and all the goodies I need rather than out there on the trail. I'm perfectly happy to fix things on the trail, but I don't want to fix things that I don't need to fix out on the trail. So let's take a look underneath Carey's car. As we go back, looking at our vehicle, and we're just taking it all in. You don't have to have a fancy lift to get here. We could jack up the car corner by corner and just take a peek under it. Carey's got all these fancy skid plates. Oh, there's a rattle. But banging on things, all this stuff's pretty tough, right? We can bang on stuff and say, oh, maybe that's that rattle I heard going down the road. How could I fix that? If I didn't want to hear that rattle, maybe it's, you know, adding a couple more bolts or changing something. But identifying those noises is huge. I can look at my steering components. So this is a rack and pinion style steering. We have these are our tie rods. So outer tie rod end comes to the inner tie rod end. On a independent suspension vehicle, these are probably one of the more vulnerable parts. You Bronco owners out there probably have heard about those because that's kind of a high failure rate on the Bronco right now. And a lot of people have asked questions about, oh, what parts do I carry? And it's so hard to say because there's so many different platforms out there with so many different models with different vehicles that it's like, oh, you know, if it was a Jeep or a truck, I could probably rattle off a few good ones, but you should be doing your own research, seeing what's failing on your vehicle at 100,000 miles, at 150,000 miles, because under hard use conditions, maybe it's going to fail at 40,000 miles. Maybe that's a consideration for either a thing to watch for or a thing to carry a spare part for. Right? Anything to add?
When you're going out on trails too, that's a good opportunity to learn what other vehicles around you might have issues with. For example, I had a friend lose both of his caliper bolts while on trail, and it was very interesting watching everybody come together and come up with a solution to get his caliper back on, and so we could get off the trail. So not just your own vehicle, but also learning from other people's experiences as well.
Yeah. So what kind of spare parts do you carry?
Well, I carry a lot of bolts and zip ties, a spare axle for sure. Okay. I know that on my Subarus, especially for the lifted Subarus, our front CV axles tend to fail, and they fail catastrophically sometimes. So I do carry that.
Okay. How many axle shafts have you broken?
I've broken none.
None.
Gratefully. I also carry a lot of spare tire repair kits, plug kits, sidewall patch kit, and different ways to get my tire off, because I'm a little person, right? I don't have as much strength as a lot of other, you know, stronger, burlier people. So I carry some tools that help me get the bolts and other nuts and stuff broken so they can come off.
Okay. All right. Well, let's just keep going down the road here. We've checked our steering. We're going to check it on both sides. We can grab a hold of things, pull on it. It's okay. This stuff's all pretty sturdy. And if I hear a clunk, 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 maybe that's something I need to address. You know, look at the axle shaft. I can grab a hold of that. No clunking there. Maybe I move the wheel around a little bit. In and out, up and down. Do I feel any clunking, any squeaking? I'm going to look at my brakes, see if I see anything going on there. I can look at the rotor. I can see portions of the brake rotor. If I see any big score marks in it where something's been rubbing, you know, is that something I need to address? I can turn the wheel. Now, this is a really good thing to look at here. On the tire itself, there's a very clean mark on this tire. I mean, something's been rubbing on it to clean it. So we checked this out a little while ago and didn't find anything. So we're assuming that it was from the environment where Carey was driving. So it's like maybe she went along a log and it cleaned this area off because both front and rear tires match. So we look good here. We're going to keep looking, bolts, just kind of everything we can see. We're going to spend a little bit of time on, and maybe we'll find a loose bolt. So you can see, even though I could see it was loose up here, I can also see around this bolt, there's some clean area indicating that that bolt's been moving around. So that's a good indication of a loose bolt. So we're going to write that down on our list and we'll come back to tighten that up. Keep going down, looking for anything out of place. Look at our exhaust coming down. Above our exhaust on this car is a drive shaft. So we've got some U-joints up in there. We can follow that down and back to the rear differential where it's connected. How we want to check U-joints, and we would check this at each U-joint, is we're going to grab both sides and move it to see if there's any dissimilar action between the joint. And then we're going to go up and down, side to side, just reef on everything a little bit to see if it's moving around. Moving on back. Look at both sides. Carey's got some aftermarket suspension here. As we were talking about noises, sometimes when we introduce aftermarket parts, we get performance versus performance. So we may get better suspension travel and better overall like suspension performance. The numbers look better, it rides better, but we lose a little bit of maybe sound dampening. So we lose some of the sound performance out of the suspension. So everything's performance versus performance, right? So out of bushings like this, I may expect a little more noise on the road. Understanding that, if I have a squeak and I identify, oh, I got a bushing noise back here, that's normal. I can put that in my brain and understand what to look for moving on. All right. Moving back, I see a little bit of oil here in the middle. And what'd you say that comes from, Carey?
That's an oil-filled bushing that is leaking, and I've known about that for a little while.
Okay.
It's definitely on my list to do before doing any more major viewing.
So really good indication of an oil leak. This is, you know, exactly what an oil leak would look like on a motor, transfer case, transmission, anything like that. The dust is going to collect and get more and more apparent. Now, if we leave an oil leak leaking for a long time, generally, you know, it's not going to hurt anything on the motor if we're leaking. But once that oil gets onto our rubber parts around the motor or around the whatever's housing the oil, like if we got a lot of oil on the CV boot, eventually it's going to degrade the quality of the boot. And same with hoses and belts and things like that. Bushings for suspension can't handle oil on it all the time. So that's why we want to fix those oil leaks. Also, we want to keep the oil on the inside of the motor because the motor needs all that oil, right? All right. All right, moving forward, let's answer some questions. So let's kind of deep dive on the spare parts to bring. You said you carry a spare axle shaft. And why'd you decide on the spare axle shaft? If you didn't break an axle shaft, how do you know to carry a spare axle shaft?
Just experience with my vehicle and other people that are out doing off-roading. I know that I've changed the geometry of my suspension. Okay. So it creates a little bit more strain on that component that's pretty well known to fail.
All right, cool. So you did a lot of research, you know, probably online, right?
Research in person.
Friends, yeah. Okay. So doing that research is huge, right? So finding out failure points of your vehicles, and, figuring out what's going on. And I don't want to harp on the Broncos, but right now it seems like that's a weak point on at least some of the earlier release Broncos. They have tie rod ends failing. So maybe that's something you consider as a spare part that you carry. Me personally, I don't carry a whole lot of spare parts. I carry, a couple handfuls of nuts and bolts that are common to my vehicle, and I carry things that will suffice to get me out to civilization. So I carry radiator stop leak. I carry rescue tape which is a self-vulcanizing tape. You can wrap hoses with it, and they may still leak a little bit, but it'll fix a big leak. I carry baling wire, which could be used as a hose clamp and could be used to wire up suspension parts or exhaust if it's falling down. I carry some hose clamps, things like that, things that have multiple uses that don't take up a ton of space or weight. And then as far as tools to affect those repairs, what do you carry?
I know the common bolt sizes for my suspension and then in the car, so I make sure I always carry those. For me, I like to have them really handy so I don't have to dig through my car to get to the tools. So the ones that I know that I use commonly, I'll put in an organizer on the back of my seat, so that I can just reach in and grab it.
And I know we got your toolbox torn apart over here.
Yeah.
Let's go take a look at it.
Wire clippers.
On our way, I could show you what I keep. I just keep a few things. I keep a screwdriver. Carry a good pair of pliers, and I carry a crescent wrench. This is like the everyday has to be in my truck type of stuff. And then I carry, on longer trips, I carry a little more comprehensive toolkit. Let's go take a look at Carey's toolkit.
And those are all the kinds of things that I like to carry in the back seat organizer. So
Right.
your essentials.
All right. Come around and tell us about your toolkit, Carey.
Oh gosh, this is actually just a conglomeration of tools that I've used for projects. It's a lot of times they just kind of migrated into the toolbox. So my common ones are, an assortment of different kinds of screwdrivers, different sizes. I've got some vice grips here, some, cutters, some files can come in handy sometimes. And then for electrical work, I've got, all the electrical tools and wrenches and just a whole variety of things that I've come to use over all different kinds of trips. Crescent wrenches, got a socket for my axle nut.
That's a really good point. So this is a special size, right?
Right.
I see that you don't have a kit that includes that. It's one special size.
Right.
And the same goes for, the other common stuff out there, like Toyotas, Broncos, Jeeps, my truck, all require this big socket for an axle nut. So knowing what that size is and, throwing that in your toolbox, you may not know how to change your axle shaft, but somebody coming down the trail that has a little more knowledge than you, maybe has a different vehicle, knows how to change it, but maybe they're not carrying that size socket. So if you have it, you'd be able to get that thing out of there and get it swapped. Even if you got to go to town to get parts, whatever you've got to do. What's that for?
This is
That looks
another one.
specialty.
This is for my rear diff.
Okay.
So I can, if for some reason I need to take that drain plug off, I always have that with me in the car. Same with one of the most important things, of course, is having the right socket for your wheel lugs and the key to get your wheels off of your car.
I always hate it when I go to the tire shop and they don't put my wheel key back in the car, and then you find out 6 months later when you get a flat tire. So
That it's not there.
that should be on your checklist before you go out. The wheel key.
Yep.
Cool. This is a pretty good comprehensive toolkit. Understanding, like Toyotas like to use kind of even size bolts in the lower end. So they use like 10, 12, 14, and like 17 and 19. So if you said, hey, I know my car takes those sizes, maybe I can leave some of the other stuff out, save some weight. Why would we want to save weight?
It just makes everything easier.
It makes everything easier.
It's
Yeah.
less stress on your car. You get better gas mileage.
Gas mileage, yeah.
Yeah.
I would love to get better gas mileage.
Not having so much stuff in the car, if you just have your essentials, it makes life a lot easier. Not having to dig through like this, I would pare back for the Rebelle. I would pare back to the essential sizes and the screwdrivers and wrenches and those sorts of things. But it's really nice to not have to dig through everything. It makes life easier.
Okay. Yeah, I would also say that weight concerns, you could carry every spare part that you may need, right? But then you're almost guaranteed to break something because you're carrying so much weight. And I know a lot of people, like you have a rooftop box. Do you keep a lot of weight up there?
I don't.
You don't?
No. Because on the top, it makes the car sway more. Okay. And I like to keep my weight low so that I keep the stability of the car when I'm going for obstacles.
Okay. Yeah. So if we put that weight up higher, we're going to be working our suspension even harder than we normally are and probably wearing it out faster, right? Yeah. So that's a good point on the Rebelle rally too. I know a lot of people try to pack and they're like, oh, the things I'm going to use a lot are going to go in the car, and the things that I'm hopefully never going to use are going to go on top of the car. But then they get into the situation where they're working their suspension, several times harder than it needs to work because of how they've loaded things. So we want to put those heavy things kind of centered between the wheels if we can, and low. So the heaviest stuff low and mid, right? And it'll help keep our car alive a lot longer. Let's go back to motor compartment. We're going to talk about filters. Do you clean your air filter after every day on the Rebelle rally?
Depending on.
And full disclosure, we cleaned a filter when she got here.
It was a cabin filter. It wasn't essential to the vehicle. But I do try to come in, if not every day, every other day, depending on the conditions that we were running in, to clean my air filter, and then to check the oil level, just to make sure that I didn't burn through a lot, I'm not low, and then just kind of keeping an eye on what things look like inside the engine compartment. Yeah, I think a visual check at the end of every day is probably solid insurance that you're not missing something that you're going to find out on the trail or on the course every day. I have kind of a warring opinion with myself on cleaning the air filter, the engine air filter out in the field. I think the engine air filters on most vehicles are designed to take a lot of abuse, and on the rally especially, taking your air filter out, blowing it out and cleaning it out gives an opportunity to introduce more dirt into the motor than you're cleaning than would pass through the filter. So I've seen at the latter end of the rally, we've had to take the intake tube off of cars, and I've seen cars that didn't have the air filter removed, that looked real plugged up. The throttle body was nice and clean. And I've seen people's cars who were cleaning their filters every day had a lot of dirt buildup in the throttle body because they were introducing that opportunity for contaminants to get in. So my personal opinion is, unless I figured out that I was experienced a performance issue because my filter was clogging up, I probably would leave it. Flip side of that, your cabin filter, I'd probably clean that out daily. Yeah, but I gotta take a whole dash and the glove box out.
So
it's probably worth
it. What about engine oil? How often do you change your engine oil?
How often do I change my oil?
Yeah.
For me, because I'm out wheeling quite often, and Subaru's, it's kind of an older engine. I have a lot of miles on it now. I'm at every 3,000 miles.
Okay.
My interval, and
That's about where I'm at on my
Yeah.
truck too. Cool. So do you run any Pennzoil stuff?
I do. Yes. Yes. I've actually switched over to Pennzoil earlier this year.
Cool.
It's been running great and
Awesome.
keeping everything nice and cool.
Yeah, so like the high mileage stuff. Especially on our, I've got 180 some odd thousand miles now. I know you're up there too. So
170.
yeah, so the high mileage stuff made a big difference in my truck. So let's cover some questions here. We've covered common tools to carry. What do you think about brake fluid?
That's something is on my list of things to learn about.
Okay.
And I know that I haven't checked or changed my brake fluid personally, but that's something I need to do.
So you and I were talking earlier about upgrading your brakes, and something with brake fluid is brake fluid should be changed, at a regular interval. And the reason is there's a lot of heat buildup at the wheels, and that heat soaks into the calipers and causes the brake fluid to degrade slightly. And it also the rubbers in the system kind of break down over time and get debris in the brake fluid. So once we start using those brakes, that fluid goes back and forth to the master cylinder, and if it fills up with all that debris from those components breaking down, it turns abrasive and wears it even faster. So, depending on your manufacturer specification, you should change it at a regular, that severe duty interval. We've got questions about tire pressure and how it affects the mechanics of the car. Tire pressure, airing down your tires, we could spend hours on airing down your tires. I could go way down that rabbit hole. But I think you should learn about airing down your tires and how much is appropriate and when is appropriate, because I think airing down your tires can be kind of a pre-suspension for your suspension, soaking up some of those bumps, those little bumps that don't have to be soaked up by the suspension and make it not work as hard. I hope that answers that well enough. You have timing belts on your car?
I think so.
Yeah. So
yes, I have that in my list of maintenance that has been performed.
Okay, great. So there's something that's a good point on prepping your vehicle. Some vehicles have a timing belt, some don't. We had a question about timing belt failures. On the trail, it really is dependent of the vehicle, whether you could just throw another timing belt on it or not. Some motors, the piston will make contact with the valves if the timing belt breaks, and you're kind of dead in the water if that happens on the trail. The motor has to come apart, you have to replace valves, sometimes more than that. Some motors out there, you can throw another timing belt on it. That comes down to maintenance intervals. Severe duty maintenance intervals are a lot shorter than our regular maintenance intervals. So if your car manufacturer recommends you change your timing belt at 100,000 miles, maybe you should be changed at 80 for a severe duty. Hopefully that answers that well enough. We had a question: why would brakes squeak a lot, but multiple mechanics all keep saying that there's nothing wrong and other people's brakes aren't squeaking? I believe this was on a FJ Cruiser in particular, was the person that asked this question. Do you have any ideas on that?
Perhaps there's a piece of gravel.
Yeah. So sometimes we could get debris stuck in there and it could cause some chatter in the brake. Generally, sometimes brakes squeak because things are dragging and it's creating a harmonic. It's always a harmonic. Sometimes that harmonic is the brakes against the rotor are chattering. And so aftermarket brakes, sometimes the mounting points aren't as tight, and so there's more room for movement. You could build chatter and more squeaking. So from the seat of my pants, I would imagine it has to do with the aftermarket brake pad that you have. And I would either seek out factory pads or a good quality aftermarket pad. Next question here is computer electronics type failures. Do you carry a scan tool?
I do.
Okay.
I have a scan tool. It's always attached to my car.
Oh, you have a scan
I have a
gauge.
scan gauge.
Yeah.
So I'm able to monitor. I don't have all of the factory built-in temperature monitoring gauges. So that's what I use to monitor my temps. But it also has a scan function for any codes that come up.
Okay, so what happens when we turn on our check engine light comes on? Generally, the computer correlates that to a code. So normally it's a P code. There are tons of scan tools out there or code readers that we can plug into the diagnostic board of our car, and it will pop up with the code related to that problem. And if we look at the definitions of those codes, you know, maybe it says your O2 sensor is out of range, right? So maybe we have a failing O2 sensor. It's nice to know what's going on there, because sometimes there are things that we can ignore till we get back to our mechanic, or sometimes there are things that we need to address
Pretty quickly.
sooner, right? The hard thing on the rally is we don't have computer access, so we can't go and Google that code. I can if you come to the mechanics area, but some scan tools have the definitions built into them. So if you go on Amazon, there's a bunch of those around. You know, I carry a $20 one in every car I have, just so I can pull those codes out relatively easily. What else we got here? Specific fluids. What do you carry for spare fluids?
Oh, well, I always have coolant with me, and that's based on recommendations and from experience.
Okay.
I always have coolant. I always have spare engine oil.
Okay.
As far as other fluids like brake clean, I have an electronics cleaner, WD-40.
Okay.
What else do we have?
Emily says, talk to the camera. So I carry some fluids. I don't carry coolant. Because I carry fluids that I can't substitute with something else.
Mm-hmm.
So I can substitute coolant with water in a pinch. Granted, I'm going to have to go back and swap that out later. I'm going to have to flush the system out, put coolant back in. I carry a few quarts of motor oil, not enough to fill my motor, but generally the people that I go with have some spare motor oil too. So if I were to puncture my motor and have to, do something to patch the hole and then pour more oil in, hopefully I'm with somebody that has some oil too, so we can put it together, and get out of there back to where I can come back to the shop, and I'd probably drain it back out and put the proper stuff back in. I carry a little bit of transmission fluid, because transmission fluid will also work for power steering fluid in most applications. Do your own research. I don't carry brake fluid. And the reason for that is brake fluid can be pretty corrosive if it breaks open. So I'm taking that gamble on not having it with me and being able to mend any problem, and hopefully there's enough brake fluid left in the system. But I've had it break open before. It corrodes paint, and I don't like the mess. So take that for as you will. But I do carry some brake clean and some WD-40 type stuff, those types of things. Let's see.
I also, one thing I have found with my suspension is it's important to grease my suspension. And this year I carried a grease gun with me on the Rebelle. It's not, of course, a necessary thing, but it's something that I learned was helpful for my car, and I did end up using it.
Okay. So one of the questions we have here says that the poster's car won't start again after it's been run until it sits for a while. and cools down, seems like. So if that's won't even turn over, like the starter won't go roo, 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 you have a problem with that starter circuit somewhere. If it turns over and goes roo, 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 but won't engage and fire up, you probably have an ignition problem. Either one of those things sounds like it's a heat soak problem. And the easy way to diagnose that without going way down that rabbit hole is a little bit of compressed air. Like if you have an air compressor, you can identify those components in that system. And after the car shuts off and won't restart, go spray air on an individual component to cool it down and see if it starts. If it starts after that, after you've cooled that individual component down, you've probably identified the problem. Without knowing more about that problem, that's as best as I can get. All right, Subaru question. What mods would we do to help prevent overheating, engine and transmission overheat? And I know you, having a CVT transmission, a constant velocity transmission, have experienced some overheating problems. What have you done to make it better or worse?
Well, the first was to know what a normal operating temperature is for the oil, the fluid. And then I also have a transmission cooler, an aftermarket transmission cooler, which will help keep the temperatures more at a regulated temperature so it doesn't overheat. And then just monitoring as I'm driving what the temperatures are so that you can modulate your driving techniques. So you're not driving it so hard if the temperatures are going higher. You just kind of scale back and let it cool down. Other things are, there's aftermarket oil coolers as well. I don't have one of those, but that's something I'm looking at introducing.
Okay. So I would say it's probably a pretty narrow margin of vehicle that needs that, right? And some do. The constant velocity transmissions have a tendency, especially like in the sand and high resistance areas, to run a little hotter. So you could put an aftermarket transmission cooler on there. You could upgrade to a better fluid. Like I know Pennzoil makes some products that run cooler, and they, changing the viscosity of what you're using in there could help with the cooling. It would take a little bit of research on that part. You could add aftermarket fans, but I would say most of our problems that we experience, most of the problems I experience both on the Rebelle rally as a mechanic and in my daily journeys around off-road, have to do with aftermarket parts. So there are some factory parts that fail, but for the most part, it seems like aftermarket parts, especially installed poorly, can lead to more headaches than not. So take that for as you will. Let's open up to questions. We have the chat going. So if you guys have any questions, type them into the chat and we'll try to answer them. Checking the U joints. Yeah, let me grab a drive shaft. Okay, so this is a standard drive shaft. This is out of an older Jeep. So when I want to check the U joint, I need to make sure there's no play. If this U joint was bad, I'd be able to rock this back and forth, and these ears would have movement between them. I'm also going to check to make sure there's no play here. And if I wanted to check and see the inside of a U joint, there's just a bunch of little needle bearings inside of there. See if I can get some light. Here we go. So there's a bunch of little needle bearings in there. That's what wears out. Those needle bearings will go dry and not have enough grease. And the play between this cap and this pin will get greater and allow movement side to side. And that's how a U-joint fails. Eventually, it moves so far that the abrupt motion will cause this shoulder to snap off. That's how we get big U-joint failures. And that's the same as in a drive shaft or a front drive shaft or front axle shaft on a Jeep would be like that. Any more questions?
Yes. We have a question about, do you carry spare lug nuts? And do you use an impact or torque wrench to tighten them?
So I do carry spare lug nuts, and we have experienced people's lug nuts loosening up on the rally, and I've definitely experienced it out on other trails, and they've lost a couple of lug nuts. So having a couple spares, 3, oftentimes if like a Jeep or a Bronco's got the spare tire on the back, we can rob those sometimes. I don't tighten my lug nuts with a impact wrench. I always will start them by hand so I don't cross-thread them. Sometimes I run them in with the impact, but I don't crank them down. I always use a torque wrench when I'm tightening. Unless I don't have a torque wrench, then I'm going to tighten with the tire iron or whatever tool I have, not the impact. I'm going to tighten with the tire iron. I'm going to drive a few miles. I'm going to check it again. I'm going to drive 20 miles. I'm going to check it again until I'm satisfied it's not going to come loose. And then at my earliest available time, I'm going to torque the lug nuts. That's one thing that, if you don't torque that, and you can over tighten lug nuts very easily and stress the lug and have them shear off, and then you can't put your tire back on at all, or you under tighten them and the tire can come off that way too. So it's just using a torque wrench is really cheap insurance to have a better day, right?
Okay, another question is, was there a hose that looked rubbed or braided on Carey's rear passenger wheel and brakes?
Oh, okay. Let's take a look.
Yeah. There sure is.
This right here?
Yes, that's something I've known about for a while.
So what is this, Carey?
That's the brake line.
The brake line or
Yes.
the emergency brake cable?
These are both.
So these are the emergency brake cable that comes back. So when you pull the emergency brake lever, there's a steel cable inside of here. And this particular sheath right here is there just for that purpose, because they knew it was going to chafe on the lower control arm here, or the lower trailing arm. And so this is a wearable part. And if I were Carey, I'd probably just come in here and I would turn that around. So now it's got a fresh wear point.
Oh, thank you.
All right. Good catch, though.
Yeah, good eyes. Okay. Next question is, Buddy's arms are steel and they haven't bent yet, but I worry about them. I checked for cracks after the mint and didn't see anything. But should I take them off and have them Magnafluxed for cracks?
Just because I want to see you work harder, I'd say yes, Emmy Hall. If it's something that you're concerned about, then sure. There's some other ways that you can do that on the car that aren't Magnaflux that you should just text me and I'll tell you about them. But they're probably really in depth for this conversation. If you are concerned about a part, though, a wearable part, take it off, take a look at it, get it in the air, run it through its paces. Powder coating is really good at hiding things. So oftentimes we want to powder coat things to make it look good, but it can really hide a lot of stuff because it floats on the surface, unlike paint will normally separate. So, yeah.
Another question is, what are your thoughts on aftermarket throttle delay fixes, such as the pedal commanders?
Oh, I've had a lot of mixed experiences with pedal commander type things. I don't want to say pedal commander because I don't know that my negative experiences were from that product, but they can be really nice. They can change your throttle modes. And I guess for people who don't know what we're talking about, you can put a device between your electronically controlled throttle and the car that changes the amount of signal or how the signal is processed to the computer, so you can get a snappier throttle or a more delayed throttle, which may be beneficial, like rock crawling, to have a squishier throttle so you're not jumping over the rocks. But those also introduce another point that's an aftermarket part that could be a failure point. So I wouldn't say, hey, don't ever use this, but I would say, hey, if you have a problem that's a weird problem that maybe is a, like my car starts and then dies, or it's hard starting, or I've got really weird throttle control, be able to unplug that thing and know how to get it out of the system. So if you do experience a problem, you can diagnose it by getting that out of the system, going back to stock and saying, okay, it still has the same problem. It wasn't that, or, oh yeah, look, that thing was causing issues.
Okay, next question is, what, if any, electrical spare parts and tools do you carry? This person has a 2018 Jeep Wrangler for reference.
2018. Okay. Well, I don't know that I'd have anything specifically for a 2018 Jeep Wrangler. I will tell you that some of the wiring on the newer Jeeps is very, very small, and the high cycle frequency of moving around the suspension around can break some of those. So having butt connectors that are very small would be good. I carry kind of an assortment of electrical connectors, like butt connectors, ring terminals, and a little bit of like 18 gauge wire, and a little bit of 14 gauge wire, and a little bit of like 8 gauge wire, and then like a combination tool that will strip and crimp and stuff like that. I like to keep my kit rather small. That way I can keep it in my car all the time. It's always ready to go, but it's still useful. So I carry a little bit of that stuff, and I definitely carry spare fuses and fuses that apply to my vehicle. So a lot of newer vehicles have specialty fuses that are, you don't go into the gas station and find them. You got to go to the auto parts store in the dealership. So make sure the fuses you're carrying fit your vehicle.
Next question is, can you address the issue of overtiring your vehicle and the problems it can create?
Overtiring, I don't know that I've ever heard of it referred in that way, but so putting bigger tires on your vehicle without like re-gearing your vehicle or not having enough clearance for the tire would be I assume what you're talking about. Bigger tires introduce more force on our vehicle. It's just what happens, but bigger tires are super cool, right? So bearings are going to wear out faster, like wheel bearings or hub assemblies are going to wear faster because we've got more weight that we're pushing around. Our transmissions might wear out faster. We might introduce more heat to our transmission. Are we back spacing? Then we might put a lot of stress on our wheel bearings and our steering components. I would say driving habit has a lot to do with big tire wear, right? Or adding to big tire wear. So if you do a lot of dry steering, which means turning the steering wheel while you're sitting still and not rolling, you're going to wear out steering components, wheel bearings, ball joints, things like that a lot faster, and then even more faster if you get bigger tires.
All right. With next question is, with all the electronics on the newer vehicles, do you recommend bringing extra fuses to the Rebelle?
I think I just answered that, but yes. So specifically to the Rebelle, I don't carry spare parts. This is my shop that we're in. I grab some stuff that happens to be around here, but I don't stock spare parts for any vehicle in particular. So if your vehicle has a specialty type fuse that I don't have, then we don't have it. Somebody's going to have to find one or we're going to have to make something work. So if you have those spare fuses and an assortment of fuses that could go bad, then, you know, it's just going to make things a lot easier for you.
And next question is, do you have any tips for diagnosing odd underhood noises, such as rhythmic hissing, but all new vacuum hoses and not coming from any belts? Their vehicle is a 3rd-gen 4Runner. The idea is about an automotive stethoscope. Would that be helpful?
Yeah. So if you want to like tech out and get nerdy, you can. They have like Snap-on sells these listening devices, basically just microphones that you can move around your car and find where those noises are and kind of move it. Our cameraman Ken told me earlier that you can take an earbud and you can remote listen. So maybe you could record video and move your earbud around the engine bay while you're driving around and kind of dial in where that noise is coming from. But automotive stethoscope generally is just a standard doctor stethoscope that's got a small rod on it that you could put against different things. But there's a lot of different components that could cause that. But I would try to dial it down to the area that it's coming from and, you know, figure it out from there.
Okay, it looks like that's the end of our current question list.
All right. Time for 4. All right. So driving habits are going to be one of the biggest things that keep your car alive. On the Rebelle specifically, it's not a race. You're going to hear Emily say over and over and over and over and over again, it's not a race. So, you know, making those good decisions and slowing down when you need to is going to save your vehicle. If you save your vehicle, then you get to sleep at night. Otherwise, if you're in the mechanics area with me at night, one of your teammates has to be there the entire time. So that means if I'm not sleeping, you're not sleeping. And you know, we'll stay up all night to fix your car, but the next day is rather miserable because you've stayed up all night. So making those good choices. Now, tires are the #1 mechanical failure on the rally. And most of the time, it's the passenger rear tire, the tire that's the farthest away from us, because we get fixated on this driver's front tire and we kind of lose the conceptual idea of where that tire is in relation to us. We've got lots of roads on the Rebelle Rally that have jagged rocks along the edges, and they just love to shred the sidewall of tires. So being aware of that, and if I have to get over, maybe I'm slowing down so I'm contacting that rock a little less aggressively. Learning how to plug a tire before the rally is going to be great, right? Going to help you out a whole bunch, because it's way faster 99% of the time to plug a tire and fill it back up than it is to change the whole tire. More questions?
Yep. Can you give the order or process of diagnosing power loss or horsepower on the trail?
Power loss on the trail. It's a pretty big question. So if I was experiencing power loss on the trail, I'm going to start feeling my car, feeling how it acts. So I'm going to try to narrow it down to, is this a fuel problem, an air problem, an ignition problem? Because most of those are going to fit into that category, or those categories. If it's a fuel problem, maybe I have a clogged vent line, something like that, and all I have to do is crack my gas cap. That was common on older vehicles that were converted to fuel injection. Maybe we have a clogged air filter. Yeah, so maybe we do take that air filter out, knock it out, and see how it runs. Maybe we have a problem with our pedal commander, or maybe we have an ignition problem that the computer is not controlling properly. Do we have a check engine light? Do we have any lights on the dash at all? It may be even, maybe a transfer case range position sensor that isn't working right, and your car thinks it's in high range when it's in low range, and it's saying, hey, I don't feel right. This doesn't make sense to me. So kind of diagnosing, you got to kind of narrow it down by, could it be this? No, it doesn't seem like it's that. Could it be this? No, it doesn't seem like it's that. Until you get a lot of experience, you can rule those things out rather quickly.
Another question is, can you address common problems or signs that you can limp your vehicle back to camp versus must stop for a fix?
Oh, that's a really good question. So if I had oil all over the bottom of my car or leaking out of the bottom of my car, I would stop. Because the oil needs to be in there, or else we're going to lose lubrication in the motor. How motors work is everything that's turning rides on a film of oil. So if the oil goes away, we start taking metal off inside the motor. So if I have any giant leak like that, my wife is experiencing that right now. She got a rather large oil leak in her car, and now we're putting a new motor in her car. If our check engine light's flashing, generally flashing means that we're having an active misfire. Flashing means we should stop. If our check engine light pops on, generally that means, get it checked at your earliest convenience. But if it's flashing, that means an active misfire. An active misfire means that maybe the spark plug is firing before the piston comes up and gets to top dead center. And so if it's firing before it, it's trying to stop the piston. We can break things in the motor doing that. So we could burn a hole in the piston, or we could crack a piston, things like that. So flashing check engine light probably means we should stop and ask for some help, figure out what's going on. Big bouts of oil. Any motor noise that sounds like this, we probably should stop. Things like that. If my transmission is engaging and then disengaging, engaging and disengaging, feels real bad or slipping real hard, I'm going to stop, because it may be salvageable at that point. Maybe we just need to add some fluid, but if we keep driving it, we're probably going to do more damage and not be able to salvage it. So, those big leaks or big noises is probably when I'm going to stop, especially if I'm not experienced. Stopping and asking for help or asking for an opinion from somebody's, never a bad place to start.
Another question is, what failures have you stayed up fixing at night?
All of them. I don't go to bed until all the cars are fixed. But we've done axle swaps. Last year we had a fuel pump that was failing and took a long time to get one, so we were up all night. We welded an axle completely back together that had been broken completely in half. That was an all-nighter. I think we got that team back on the starting line right at 7 a.m. I went to bed at 8:30 the next morning and slept till 11. So that was a fun one. But yeah, and just about anything you can think of, we've stayed up for. The only car that we didn't that broke that we did turn wrenches on to make it pass was one that, oddly enough, cracked the oil pan, leaked all the oil out, and the motor seized. And we would have fixed that, but there was a big expense to get a motor out there and everything. So the team decided not to do that.
All right, next question is, any specific tire plug recommendations, like fix a flat or any others?
I will say, don't use fix a flat, because the tire guys will hate you and it doesn't really work well. I like the ARB tire plug kit. It's simple and it's easy to use, and there's lots of them on Amazon that are very similar. So pick one and go with it. Learn how to use it. You'll find when you're shopping for it, you can find tire plugs that are different in length. Generally there's two different lengths. I like the longer ones. They're easier to use. That's the big recommendation. But having a well-rounded tire repair kit that has some valve stems in it, I will recommend the Colby valve stem repair valve stems. They're cool. If you rip off a valve stem, you can put a new valve stem in from the outside. If you don't know what I'm talking about, Google Colby valve stem, and they have got lots of videos on that.
Next question is, when it comes to the unanticipated off-ball, less likely edge case things that might happen on the trail, what are the tools and materials you find most helpful? Duct tape, ratchet straps, holy water?
Holy water, yes, holy water. You know, I use duct tape occasionally, and I carry it because it's really easy to carry. I generally wrap duct tape around like something else, like my brake clean or whatever, so I don't have the whole roll of duct tape with me. I like compact and things that you know, are useful and don't take up a ton of space. I use the heck out of ratchet straps all the time. I love them. You can if you break a track bar mount, you can crisscross ratchet straps from the frame to the axle and drive your car again. My little Jeep trailer came out of Death Valley one time riding on ratchet straps when the torsion axle broke. So yeah, a nice complement of straps is great. I normally carry one large one, 2-inch wide ratchet strap, and then a bunch of the 1-inch wide ones. I do use baling wire for a lot. Again, it's wrapped around that same can as the duct tape, and you know, you can use baling wire for hose clamps. You can use it for all sorts of stuff. So as funny as redneck as that is, I use a lot of baling wire for trail repairs, not in regular repairs. But a good set of pliers, a high quality crescent wrench, and I know that sounds funny, but there's different qualities and tools. The fitment of the crescent wrench, where they go together, if it's all loose and wobbly, it's going to strip bolts. So high quality, I try to buy high quality tools. It'd be a good time to plug Milwaukee Tools, maybe. Next question.
Next to tires, what other common failures do you see on the Rebelle?
Shocks. Shocks are a common failure, but not always something that we have to deal with. If you have 3 functioning shocks, you're probably fine. And it's probably not something I'd carry a spare for. But I'd say the next most common failure is not a part, but it's poor workmanship on installed aftermarket parts or poorly prepared cars. So we catch a lot in tech inspection normally, like, oh, hey, did you know your drive shaft was about to fall out? Or, oh, hey, you know, this part's about to fall off your car. And we like to catch those things, not because we're trying to call you out or point it out, but because it's going to cause a problem for you on the rally. And we want you to have that opportunity to not have that problem on the rally. So, yeah. If you're going to install your own parts, or you're going to use a friend to install parts, that's great. Just you know, maybe have somebody else check it that's you know, well versed in those things.
Next question is, are there any items that are consistent you have seen with the electric vehicles on the rally, or advice on some simple prep?
For electric vehicles, so most of the electric vehicles have been pretty solid. There haven't been any like weird like wear problems. Most of the problems with the electric vehicles that we've seen have been driver related. You know, they could slow down a little bit. I'm not trying to call anybody out, but I'd say most of it's that. So I haven't experienced any actual EV problems like with the electric portion of the car. There's obviously there's the standard car parts, our car parts, and you know, tires and suspension and stuff like that we've experienced with, but nothing that was in particular EV. And I will say the charging end of it is handled by Renewable Innovations, and those guys are awesome, and I never have to deal with that. So Ken, our cameraman, his question is, how do you get the sand out? And The answer is you don't. You just live with it.
It's extra weight.
Every time I turn my heater on full blast, my dash gets coated in sand.
And I think the final question we have is, do you recommend any special treats we should carry for you?
For me,
Uh-huh, and your team.
no, just get to the start line the next morning. That's what we're there for. We want to make sure everybody finishes. So we definitely don't want to be fixing silly things that should have been handled ahead of time. We will happily, but we like those big breaks, So prep your car ahead of time, and we'll see a tech inspection. It's 4:13. Okay. Any more questions?
No, those were the old ones.
Really? You guys
Yeah.
don't have more questions? All right.
Okay, what's the Jeep behind you for?
All sorts of fun stuff. That's just a project that I built over a couple of years for a friend of mine. Let's talk about tie rods real quick, because tie rods are probably another common failure. And because inner tie rods, especially, this is a Toyota style and Bronco style inner tie rod end. So this would mount on this side to your rack and pinion, and then there'd be an outer tie rod that goes out to your wheel. This is what it looks like. This has been cut away so we can see the inside, but it's a ball and socket. Okay, so this will wear and sometimes get play between that ball and socket, but normally the failure point is right in here. This will bend. And a lot of times that's because of dry steering. So we're sitting still while we're turning our steering wheel. And other times it's because our wheel is turned when we hit a rock or a hard surface. So if I have my wheels going straight up and over a rock, this is going to be a lot stronger than if I hit the rock at the edge of the tire. It's going to force a lot of exaggerated force into this piece, and this will bend. So that's the failure point on this. More questions?
We have one more question. How many times have teams needed their second spare on the Rebelle?
And this is specific for primarily the all-wheel drive class, the cross.
Yeah, so in the all-wheel drive class, it's allowed to carry 2 spares. Well, I think you can carry 2 spares if you wanted to in the four-wheel drive class, but the rally will carry an extra spare for the all-wheel drive class. And it's not uncommon to use that second spare because a lot of the crossover tires are not as durable as the heavier truck tires. So when we're running Jeeps and Tacomas and Broncos, full-size trucks, those types of vehicles, we're putting light truck tires on there. Generally, they have really heavy sidewalls. One of the downfalls when we put that style tire, like what Carey has on her car, she's got a heavier tire on here. So they have a heavier sidewall. One of the downfalls of that is it's a heavier tire. So we could, put more strain on our steering, our wheel bearings, and we definitely lose fuel economy. So this heavier tire has some drawbacks, but off-road, it's a lot nicer. Even though this is a heavier tire for her car, it's not quite as heavy as a tire like this. That's a truck tire. So the crossovers, tend to see a little more tire carnage. Also, we only have this much sidewall on here. So we have an overall smaller tire. When we're soaking up bumps, there's less squish here, right? So it just has less give to moosh around obstacles. It's getting cold.
Question is, how many spare tie rods are adequate for the rally?
0 to 1 would probably be what I said. there's only been, I would say, 4 or 5 times that we've had to change tie rods. I would definitely consider carrying one. I'm not saying you should carry one or you shouldn't. You should consider it. And, you as a driver should know how you drive. If you are, I like to call them red drivers and blue drivers. If you're a red driver, like myself or Emmy Hall, maybe you carry a spare tire rod. If you're a blue driver and a little more conservative, a little easier on your car, then maybe it's not as big of a concern for you.
Another question is, do you have any advice on limping a vehicle back to the start of the trail if the brakes go very bad or fail?
Yeah, do it as safely as possible. Whatever that takes, do it as safely as possible. Don't rely on just clamping off a brake line. Put another vehicle behind it with a strap between them. I've taken vehicles out of the trail that had no power and no brakes. So we've had a vehicle attached to the front and to the back. So the front vehicle is the drive, the back vehicle is the brakes. And maybe if we get into a really steep section, we're adding another vehicle behind it to add more traction and weight to stop it.
There's a note here about Pirelli is relaunching the Great Contingency Program, and competitors get a major discount and free installation at Discount Tire. The Scorpion ATR and Scorpion All Terrain Plus is excellent for the X-Cross class.
Awesome. So that was from Emily Miller. If you heard that, check out that awesome deal from our wonderful partner at Pirelli Tires.
So Rebelle competitors for 2023, watch your email for the details.
Awesome. Any more questions?
No.
Emmy Hall wants to know when there's going to be a Miata class.
It looks like just comments at this point.
Okay.
Let me check here, something that will just come in. Is there a list of things to get used to checking daily in order to create good habit for preparing?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I kind of have a tiered thought process on it. So in my daily life, I never walk right to my driver's door. I always walk around my vehicle. I always walk around it far enough away that I can see underneath it to the midpoint under it. It's going to be different for a Subaru as it is for the Power Wagon, right? But if I can see under it, I can see oil leaking. And I look in my wheel wells and it's just at a glance, but I can't tell you how many times I've been like, oh, that doesn't look right. I should probably address that. So I do my vehicle 360 all the way around. It also lets me know that I don't have any dogs or chickens or kids under my tires. So it's a great safety thing. So I do that walk around. I'll notice if my taillight's broken that way. That could get me out of a traffic stop. And then every Monday morning, or is what I do, but every week, I pop my hood, I check my oil, I look at the fluids, and I lean down and I look under the vehicle. So I should be able to see shiny stuff. I should be able to see oil. I should be able to see anything that's out of place. And then once a month, I jack the wheels up on my vehicle. I give them a shake. I cycle the steering back and forth while I have somebody cycle it back and forth while I'm looking at it. And I just kind of do, a 10-minute, it's literally 10 minutes, front to back on the car. And I have caught more things like that than I could tell you. And then, probably for me, it's normally when I get home from an event, I put the vehicle on the lift and I go stem to stern, with a fine tooth comb, and I document any problems I find and address them as needed. But it's just like driving. It's seat time. The more time you spend involved with your vehicle, the more you're going to know about it, the more you're going to notice when something isn't right.
Well, that's the end of the questions at this moment. If anybody has more questions, get them on in. Just a lot of thank yous.
Well, you're welcome. Oh yeah, so Ken's got a good point. Jacks, that's probably a big question. The first thing I'll say that a lot of teams learned in the tire change challenge several years ago is you shouldn't be using a high lift jack to change your tire. It's not an appropriate tool for tire changing. Fight me, I dare you. 90% of the vehicles, 99% of the vehicles on the rally, even if they're lifted, the factory jack will change your tire. A factory jack on a Jeep JK or JL will change a 40-inch tire. So your factory jack should be sufficient for everything. The Hohens have an awesome idea where they get under their vehicle and they spray paint their jack points on the vehicle where the jack lifts. They spray paint them orange. So at the end of the day, when they're all tired and it's day 6 and it's rough and they get a flat tire, they don't have to go, oh, where was I supposed to jack again? Is it here or is it here? They go, oh, orange spot right here. Super cool idea. But the factory jack for lifting your vehicle is just fine on most vehicles. I will say adding a small platform, I carry just a little piece of plywood that's 5/8 thick, can be really nice and soft surfaces just to make it so the jack doesn't sink in. But knowing your jack points is huge. They'll be in your manual and you should know that before you show up to the rally for sure.
We have another question. At what point would you stop modifying in order to shake down well enough for the rally?
That's a really, really good question. I wouldn't do any major modifications. It's not so much a time thing, it's more like a mileage thing. If you can't put some good service miles on, I'm talking like 1,000 or 2,000 miles, if you can't put some significant miles and in the type of terrain you're going to be in, you shouldn't do it. Just wait till the next year. That's been an issue for some people, like, oh, I just did this and now this is all wonky. I'm going to do this because it's going to give me that edge. Really, is it really or is it going to be just another thing in the back of your mind? Oh, did that get installed correctly? I will say paint marking bolts is huge. So if I were to tighten the bolt, let me see. Probably a better way to demonstrate this, but if I just put a torque wrench on this bolt, tightened it up, I'm going to take a Milwaukee paint pen and give it a nice mark. So when I do my walk around inspection on my vehicle and I'm looking under there, I will notice if this bolt has moved. If it's moved, it's not tight anymore, and I can address that. So everything I touch, when I do a big job, especially suspension parts, I'll get a paint mark. So at a glance, I can check it.
There was something to note that it's important point that bone stock vehicles have won the Rebelle Rally multiple times.
Absolutely.
A number of overly modified vehicles have struggled with problems.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's a really good point to bring up. And as a person that modifies vehicles, often it hurts my heart. But yeah, you think about it, vehicle manufacturers spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on engineering, and those parts are designed to work together. So, especially for, a 7 to 10 day period, those parts are probably going to be pretty dialed.
Can you talk a little bit more about using recovery boards to stabilize a jack for a tire change?
Yeah, so sometimes Maxtrax or other recovery boards like that. We love our Maxtrax. You can put them down and then put your jack on top of them. Not always does everything fit right because they've got all the little nubs. So sometimes that Maxtrax, in conjunction with that piece of plywood or maybe a thick floor mat or all four of your floor mats or something to create a good bed for your jack would be appropriate. You know, especially sand. I've used 2 Maxtrax this way and then 2 Maxtrax this way and then a piece of plywood on top before I was able to jack up the vehicle. So, you know, more importantly, you know, it's all about using your head. You know, where, you know, what do I need to accomplish? Where could it go wrong? How do I mitigate it going wrong? And then, you know, go 10% check, go 10% check, go 10% check until you get over there.
An exhaust jack was a question.
Exhaust jack, yeah. So I've seen somebody use an exhaust jack on the Rebelle rally. For those of you that don't know what they are, they're kind of a big bag and they have a big hose and you stick the hose on your exhaust and it uses that large volume of air to expand and lift the vehicle, and they can lift a lot of weight because of that large volume of air. I had one for several years and it was neat. We used it in training a lot, but it's not always appropriate. Sharp things can puncture it. So, you know, in the sand, it's a really good recovery tool. I wouldn't call it a good tire changing tool because there's no solid mechanical device holding it up. If the bag were punctured while the tire was off, you wouldn't have anything there to save you. So if I was doing that, I would want something to be able to put under the car that could support the vehicle if the jack were to fail.
Question was, do we need to carry 4 Maxtrax or recovery boards for success in the rally?
I don't know that you need to carry any for success in the rally, but I carry 4. I've seen lots of teams that carry 2. I would say, you know, whatever you're comfortable with. Oftentimes there's other teams with more Maxtrax. So if you need 2, 4, 6, 8, people are normally willing to help out. But my standard loadout is 4.
That seems to be the last question.
All right. It looks like we're coming to the end of our time frame here too. So thanks everybody for joining us. I'm sorry if I seemed nervous or didn't know what to do here, but it's my first time. So and thanks Carey for coming and helping out. So Carey made the long drive all the way up here just for this. And I hope to see everybody at Tech Inspection for the rally. And those of you that joined us that not rally related, I hope to see you out on the trail sometime. Yeah. All right, bye.